Hello everybody, welcome again to the Adventures Travel Club television show, and as you can see we're standing in front of the Brandenburg Gate, so that must mean that we are in Berlin, and that's exactly where we are,
That's
right?
where we are.
And we'd like to welcome you to the show. We have an absolutely wonderful guide who's standing almost... Yeah, she's still here. I thought maybe she got blown away with that, because you can hear a lot of noise in the background. Anyway, you're going to have a wonderful tour with us today as we tour the city of Berlin. So hang on and away we go.
Influential and active in Chicago. And then finally, directly in front of us, the State Library. Now, we're going to be covering Potsdam Square, the biggest construction site of Berlin, but I know that we'll be coming back to this later on, just simply due to the irrational way of driving I'm forced into today. So right now I would rather take the time to explain a little bit about the collections, the museums here. I can talk about the construction site later. The picture gallery that I just mentioned, as I said, has just been re-inaugurated. The point is that when Berlin was divided, everything was divided. During World War II, you can imagine all the museums were emptied of their treasures, not just crates, and brought into the countryside, preferably into natural mines. Salt mines or caves or something of the sort. And then, under ideal circumstances, after the war, the collections were brought into the cities and brought back into the museums, or the museums were repaired and then the collections were recreated. In Berlin, half of the boxes ended up in the hands of the Soviets and half of the boxes ended up in the hands of the Americans. So it was only through the reunification that we could even start thinking about bringing these collections back together. And so since 1990, specialists, historians have been digging into the archives, checking what have we got, what can we do with this, what have we acquired since '45, how can we bring them together, into which buildings. And so every time a new collection, a new reunified collection is reopened, for us it's one more step towards becoming normal, towards really experiencing, let's say, the reunification in these vital aspects. And so for us this is very exciting to see that such things are possible. Wie gesagt, wenn wir dürfen. Yeah. And I will be mentioning another collection later on. The new antique collection also is a new old collection that's just been inaugurated. Now, this is where we get iffy. We don't know how far we'll get this way, but one thing I'd like to mention also, aside from the construction site, is the fact that this street here, from left to right, is where the Berlin Wall ran. We are now exactly on the former borderline. We would have the wall right in front of us right now if it still existed. And I think I mentioned, no I don't think I did. Let's make sure you know, there were two walls between West and East Berlin, because how in heavens are you going to guard an urban border if it only consists of a wall? So there was a second one in order to isolate a certain amount of area, and that's where the East German border guards were, where the watchtowers were, and all these things. So this whole open space here, from here to your right, was the borderline. And here to your right, on this small side street, is where, long before the wall was built, right behind this wooden fence, this is where Hitler's center of power was. This is where the Chancellery stood, the Reichskanzlei. And you might realize that in the garden, underneath the garden of the Reichskanzlei, is where Hitler's private bunker was, the Führer bunker. And you understand that was in the borderline when Berlin was still divided. Okay, I gotta be quick. Up ahead is the Brandenburg Gate. And you see that funny glass dome there? That's the Reichstag. They won't let us further. I was hoping they would. We'll have to see if we can get to this, or at least see it from a distance in a moment. We'll have to see what we can do. Ich fürchte aber, dass die uns rechts jetzt auch nicht lang lassen, wenn sie hier schon zumachen.
Sicherlich nicht. Wenn wir dann zurückfahren und dann können wir maximal über den Platz fahren.
Generally, okay, then I can go into the construction site a little bit. What you're looking at here, and have been looking at, ladies and gentlemen, of course, is the largest urban construction site of Europe, the construction site Potsdam Square, or Potsdamer Platz. And this, in pre-war times, of course, was the... in pre-war times, Potsdam Square was the true center of Berlin, where you could feel the heartbeat of the world capital, the pulse of the big city Berlin. This is where the highest density of traffic once was, where the biggest, most established hotels, cafes, restaurants, department stores, amusement centers and such were once located. And all of this and much more was destroyed. You have to imagine Potsdam Square kind of like Times Square or Piccadilly Circus to a certain extent. That's what it was like. And all of that was destroyed. And not only was it destroyed by the bombs of World War II, but then Potsdam Square was cut into two halves by the Berlin Wall, remember? And the two walls between West and East Berlin, let's say normally, they were about 20 meters, 25 meters apart from each other. That's not much. Here they were about 200, 250 meters apart from each other. And so therefore not only was this cut into two halves by the wall, most of it was isolated between the two walls. So no restructuring was ever possible. And for many people, the loss of the world standards that Berlin once had were directly connected with the loss of Potsdam Square because of what it had once been. And therefore, if you just simply accept that thinking, that way of thinking, then it's very understandable that when the wall came down, the excitement was just overwhelming. In considering the reconstruction of Potsdam Square, the status, the prestige in recreating a legend, in knitting back together West and East Berlin, in creating a new city center between the old city center and the other new city center, another city center between the two halves, let's say, of the city. That, of course, was exciting enough for big international investors to want to participate in Potsdam Square. And, of course, the big investors are widely known throughout Germany because everybody's attention is upon Potsdam Square right now. The biggest investor is Debis. You might not be familiar with Debis right now, but I promise you, you know Debis indirectly, because Debis stands for Daimler-Benz Inter-Services. And I think now you should know who Debis is. And the second largest investor is Sony, and they, of course, should be familiar as well. Okay, second time around across Potsdam Square. 8 billion German marks are being spent on this construction site, and Debis and Sony, of course, are only the two largest. The Sony Center is here to your left. That's what we've circled first around the construction site just now. And here to your right, all of what you see here to your right is the Debis property. And obviously they're not only building their own headquarters here, but that also is an important part. Sony is building its European headquarters here, which gives you an idea of how much weight they're putting on Berlin as a location for Europe of the international scale. Debis isn't all that big. Mercedes is, of course, but Debis itself is building its German headquarters here. It's mostly a German company. Here to your left you can see a simulation of what the Sony Center is going to look like when it's finished. Erstmal geradeaus. Wir gucken. Wir versuchen es. Wir machen weiter. Ja, der Reichstag wird dann auch unmöglich sein. Trainieren. There's also 3 5-star hotels, a gambling casino, a huge musical theater, a 360-degree movie theater, a media center, a media museum, all kinds of office space, commercial space, and so on and so forth are being created here at Potsdam Square. Debis is inaugurating 10 buildings. One already has been opened. 10 other ones of 12 are being opened this October. Sony wants to inaugurate in early 2000. So most of this will be finished by the turn of the century. And here to your right is the info box, the information center here at Potsdam Square. And that was created in order to show the visitor what is going on here, what is being done, all the background information. It's created for a layman, for just an average person. So it's not for specialists, for engineers and architects, but rather anyone who's interested in learning more about the construction here, what's happening, could visit this. It's very, very interesting. Through blueprints, through scale models, through computer simulation, and even virtual reality, the visitor is shown exactly what's going on here. And I'll tell you what's going on with you right now. You have just crossed the former border. You are now in, or we are now in, what used to be East Berlin. However, please also don't underestimate the fact that we are also in the district Mitte. So we are also in the historical and geographical center of Berlin. It seems as if Wilhelmstrasse at least is open. Wilhelmstrasse was the main government street in pre-war Berlin. This is where most of the government buildings were, especially during the Nazi period. And here the next side street to your left is Vossstrasse again. That's where the new Reichschancellery stood. And the old Reichschancellery that wasn't sufficient for Hitler, according to his opinion, was here to your left. Also the Imperial Propaganda Ministry was here, the Ministry of Aviation was here, the headquarters of the Gestapo and SS were here, and all kinds of other important, all of the important government buildings and many less important ones as well. And as you can see, obviously, this was an important strategic target to the Allies, and obviously also nobody wanted to rebuild these government buildings after World War II. Generally, 90% of the historical Berlin was destroyed during World War II. The bombings were not as sudden as in Dresden, but they were as devastating as in Dresden, because you have to picture the fact that from 1943 until 1945, the Allies hardly stopped bombing Berlin. Now here to your left you can see an open plot. That is where the British Embassy is going to be built. That is where the British Embassy used to be, and they have reclaimed the property. The original US Embassy was directly at the Brandenburg Gate. Just down the road from here you would be seeing the backside of the property. And ich frage mich, warum die Straße offen ist. Aber egal. And then right next to that is where the Brandenburg Gate is. Now I'm pretty sure, well maybe we will be able to, maybe we can cut across Paris Square so you can at least get a closer look, but I'm pretty sure we won't be able to stop here, but we'll see, we'll try. Anyway, just to prepare you already, the building around this open plot, that's the Hotel Adlon. That's our newest hotel, a very famous hotel. The Hotel Adlon was originally built at the end of the last century with the goal to create an absolutely luxurious hotel in Berlin. Berlin was slowly turning into a real-world capital, but we really didn't have a world-class hotel in Berlin. We had some big five-star hotels, but nothing comparable to London, Rome, Paris, and such. And so this was created, and it was a sensational success. Everybody and anybody wanted to be involved with the Adlon if they could afford to do so. Was wir jetzt machen, wir fahren rechts, wenden, fahren links, dass wir wenigstens mal, vielleicht lassen Sie uns ja einmal um. Okay, here to your left, oh look at that. There's the Brandenburg Gate. Sorry, don't waste your film. What we're going to do, we're going to U-turn again and stop here, because this is the only time you're going to get this close. Yeah, the Brandenburg Gate was originally built in 1791. It's about 200 years old, and it was built as a city gate using the Propylaeas in Athens. That's the entrance to the Acropolis as a inspiration, basically. And today, as I said before, the Brandenburg Gate is the only remaining city gate of Berlin of 18 that originally surrounded the city. And on top of the Brandenburg Gate is the Quadriga. The Quadriga is a four-horse-drawn carriage with the Greek goddess of victory, the goddess Victoria. Forget that. Greek goddess. Nike, not Victoria. Nike, like the shoes. Queen Victoria. That's well, Victoria is the Roman goddess of victory, don't forget. Anyway, that's Nike up there, even though it doesn't really matter. It's same goddess, different name. Anyway, in front of the Brandenburg Gate is Paris Square, and you have to imagine, when Berlin was still divided, both Paris Square and the Brandenburg Gate were enclosed by the two walls. The inner barrier was just here at the next side street. That's how far you could get if you were in East Berlin. Okay? They didn't build a physical wall here because they wanted tourism. And you can see that this is the nice side of the Brandenburg Gate. And so obviously tourists often came to East Berlin just to see the Brandenburg Gate from the right side. So there was only a fence here and then heavy guarding. And then on the other side was the Berlin Wall. And I would suggest, if you would like, if you don't mind the rain, and really this is the best I can do for you right now, is that we walk together through the Brandenburg Gate, and then I'll tell you a little bit, because the Reichstag's just beyond there, and we can't go there by bus. I've already established that fact. So this, we can walk a little bit through the rain and take a look at the Reichstag together, okay? As soon as we stop the bus. Of course, anybody who wants to stay on is obviously free to do so. And it'll be a little bit of walking, of course, but the Reichstag, you remember you saw both very close together, so we'll do that. Was ich jetzt machen werde, parkst du da drüben und dann laufe ich mit denen zum Reichstag durch.
Mach ich.
Und dann laufe ich wieder.
I mean, obviously I'm madly in love with this city, or I wouldn't be able to talk about it every single day, but I actually venture to say that this was once prettier, more beautiful than Paris, but the Parisians would hate me for that. This is the old Paris Square as of 1894. You can see how it was enclosed, such as it's being rebuilt now. Now, some of this, if you don't look too close, you might think, oh, it was left standing, or it's a historical restoration. But if you look at, for instance, a picture like this one, you can see that's obviously not the case. In 1948, everything was destroyed. And in 1992, the wall was gone, but there was not a single building here except for the Brandenburg Gate. The wall ran along this road here. That's the road on the other side. That's the one we tried to get through earlier, where we had to go around the construction site again. And then the inner barrier was at the end of Paris Square. Yeah? And here you have an aerial view of the Paris Square in the early years of the 20th century. Shows you that it was a square in the literal sense of the term. Because a lot of people who've seen the Brandenburg Gate without anything left and right of it have wondered, why in heavens have they permitted to build buildings so close to it? Well, simply because it's a restoration or a reconstruction of the original. Most of the designs here are modern. I mean, even this is a modern design, but you can see with looking back towards what used to stand here nonetheless, you know, with respect for what used to be here. And the open plot to the left of that small building with the red awning, that's where the U.S. Embassy was and where it will be again in the near future. Okay, you want to go to the center, take some pictures, and then we'll walk through the Brandenburg Gate together.
Well, Betty, what do you think so far of Berlin?
Oh, you know, I'm astounded. I knew about the bombing, but I didn't know there had been that much destruction.
90-some-odd% of the city.
Oh, my God. And look at the wonderful job of restoration they're doing. I think Berlin is beautiful. I do.
Well, you know, the whole thing is that Berlin is a brand new city now. I mean, you know, it just, you see those cranes almost everywhere, especially in what would have been the eastern part of Berlin, or still is the eastern part, but so much building. This is what really surprised me. I had no idea. It's like somebody says, okay, here, let's rebuild the city. Let's start from scratch. Yeah. And it looks like that's what they've done.
Well, they did, but I guess they used the plans because that's what she was talking about, building so close to the gates again. You know, aesthetically, I guess it would have been nice to have moved them off a little bit, but they knew what they were doing.
Evidently, they're some very fine architects, I think, that they brought in from, you know, all over the world, not just Germans, but other architects as well. And, you know, in front of us would be the great big street there. I don't remember what the name of it is, but that's where so many demonstrations were held, of course, during the Nazi era of Germany. But today, it's going to be the Love Parade, right?
What a mess.
Well, over 1 million kids coming into Berlin for this is really something. And you can probably, you know, a lot of times hear the whistles, because that's what the big thing was. All these kids had a whistle, and they must have passed them out for free. But boy, they were sure making good use of them.
Well, better to have them there than what was there before.
Oh, that's for sure.
No, I'll not ever I do complain. What am I talking about? Because I think they overdid it, but it was in a peaceful way.
Yeah. Well, we're going to learn a little bit more about the Reichstag and about this particular area of the park that we're going to go through, now that you have seen the Brandenburg Gate.
For the King of Prussia to be politically powerful enough to be able to unify the German kingdoms and states. Vague memories from history class somewhere there? Okay. Last victories of Prussia were against Denmark, Austria, remember, the Habsburg power was by then entirely beaten through this victory. That was the last defeat, basically. And then France, which of course also once had been a very, very powerful nation in Europe, also defeated by this Kingdom Prussia. And so therefore the King of Prussia, William I, is able to go to Versailles, the last intimidation, insult towards the French, to crown himself first emperor of the new German Empire. Okay? And this is then Emperor William I, the grandfather of Emperor William II, thanks to whom we have had World War I. And of course, William I himself couldn't have done this alone. He had, of course, an excellent political and military advisor, and that was Bismarck. So actually, we're talking about Bismarck's achievements here. And that explains why the Column of Victory is where it is right now. Because originally, the Column of Victory stood in front of the Reichstag. You can't see it, but we're going there in a minute, the Parliament building. And that makes sense, because you don't have an imperial parliament before you have an empire, do you? And this stands for the founding of the empire, and so one was the result of the other. But Hitler moved it to this position in 1939 because he considered himself a political successor of Bismarck. He justified many things that he did, many of his actions, through Frederick II, Frederick the Great, and through Bismarck. And so he wanted the Column of Victory where he could use it, where he could benefit from it, and that was on this big boulevard. The big boulevard where today the big theme of the day will be love. Once was the big propaganda street and parade street of National Socialism. This is where the big political rallies were. Albert Speer designed this street in this width and length, and you will see it further west later on, but most of it will be blocked because of the Love Parade today. This part of the street is also known as the Street of the 17th of June. That was a name that was given to the street after June 17th of 1953, when there was an attempt at rising up against the East German system in East Berlin and other parts of East Germany, where they demonstrated against Stalinism and for free elections, for more liberty in the East. And you might remember that that was beat down very bloodily by the Red Army. Many people died on this day. And the West Berliners were standing on the edge of West Berlin. There was no wall, there was no physical barrier, but there was a political border, of course. And so they couldn't do anything. They were watching the Red Army shooting demonstrators, and they couldn't do anything. So the reaction in the West was to declare this day a day of memorial in West Germany until the actual reunification. That was the Day of German Unity. It was an official national holiday every year in West Germany and West Berlin. Today, of course, we've changed. The Day of Unity is, of course, the Day of Reunification today. October 3rd of 1990 is when we celebrate the actual reunification, but the road commemorates these victims. Back to the east-west axis, however, the parade street that Speer built for Hitler has a length of 18 kilometers, from the Brandenburg Gate all the way to the city limits of Berlin. That's well over 10 miles. Straight through the city at this width, which is an unusual size for a street, if you know Europe at all. In the States, of course, that's normal, but in Europe, the streets are usually not that generous, or rarely. And normally, of course, this place is congested with traffic. So actually, it's kind of nice that the roads are wide. If you can still keep up with me, we still have the Reichstag.
I will know that I have been here.
Well, Betty, weren't you just dying to get a whistle and get out there with the love parade that's going to start after a while?
Not really.
Well, they say it's better to make love than make war, and that's what the kids will be doing a little bit later on today here in Berlin.
They did a little bit of both.
They hear Tiergarten, they see it on the map, and they think it's the zoo. Because if you had a little bit of German at one time or another, you might know Tiergarten translates literally animal garden. So it's kind of a logical assumption to make. But the Tiergarten, as you can see, is not the zoo, but rather it used to be the hunting grounds of the royalty outside of Berlin. And if you think about it, we're just outside of Berlin right now. The Brandenburg Gate was a city gate once, so historically this was a big wooded area where the royalty hunted. It's now the largest public park of Berlin. You can claim it as a central park because it has an area of 750 acres, and it was created in the style of English or Romantic landscaping, which is the style, the fashion of the early 19th century.
You know, it's sort of hard for me to imagine that this park was outside of the city of Berlin, and now Berlin being so big is just sort of in the central. But as she stated, that the Brandenburg Gate was one of the gates right there at the entrance to the city of old Berlin. But this was beautiful in here, didn't you think so?
You know, You look at this and you see the rain, and it's just a gentle rain that falleth down from heaven, because we weren't cold.
No, it was
It was a gentle, warm rain. And refreshing in many ways when it rains like that.
Sometimes it's better to have a little coolness like this than to be too warm. Anyway, let's join us here at the Reichstag.
This is the Reichstag. This is the former Imperial Parliament building of the German Empire and the future Federal Parliament of Germany, of the Federal Republic of Germany. It's a building that is about 100 years old. Don't try to go too far, you're going to get into a security area. Okay. It's about 100 years old. It was inaugurated in 1894. Built, therefore, as a result of the founding of the German Empire and the fact that Berlin was the capital of this empire. And I would venture to say that this building historically is more important than the Brandenburg Gate. The Brandenburg Gate is more famous, but this building has witnessed, in the 100 years of its existence, every political change that Germany has gone through directly, or been directly involved, actually. And there have been many changes in the short time of a century, more than were good for the Germans, as you might know. When this was inaugurated, we still had a monarchy. William II was still in power as emperor. This monarchy was then abolished through the November Revolution at the end of World War I. And on November 9th of 1918, a German politician from the Social Democratic Party called Philipp Scheidemann, he stood on a balcony of the Reichstag to proclaim the first German Republic, thus beginning what we today know as the Weimar Republic, the first German attempt at democracy. This, by the way, is Scheidemannstraße today. It commemorates that fact. You might know, if you know history well, that at the same time, a member of the Communist Party, Karl Liebknecht, was trying to proclaim the first socialist Republic of Germany at the Castle of Berlin. This was almost simultaneous to the proclamation here, but without success. The democracy, the Weimar Republic, of course, was a big disaster in time. Many political murders took place, assassinations took place. The world market crash caused for Germany, just like many countries of the world, to collapse in a huge crisis of unemployment and dissatisfaction. And many people, of course, were looking for scapegoats for the desolate situation they were in. The inflation was unbelievable. And so many, of course, blamed it on these new politicians. And many, of course, therefore, were starting to demand more and more a big change here.
I just loved our guide. She gave us so much information, and I didn't know that much about German history, but I do now. We're going to find out more, of course, in our next episode. But Betty, if people are interested in the trips that we have coming up, all they have to do is give you a call at
488-7443.
Give that one more time.
I'll be waiting. 488-7443.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.